James Paxton's coming off of a really rough start in Houston, but is it just one bad start or is it signs of a bigger problem? What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Red Seat Radio. My name is Corbin, and James Paxton has been flat out fantastic for the Boston Red Sox so far in 2023. This year, he has become one of, if not the most consistent and reliable pitchers on the Red Sox pitching staff, and he's been a big reason why the Boston Red Sox as a team and the Red Sox rotation specifically have been able to stay afloat amongst a ton of rotational injuries, right? James Paxton has been a really important piece to the Boston Red Sox, but lately there have been a few cracks in James Paxton's season, and the question here is it going to lead to a bigger problem? So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what's up with James Paxton, what's going on, why it could be a problem, and how the Red Sox can fix it before it becomes a bigger issue. But before we get into that, do me a favor. Make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. Helps these videos out a ton, and it would mean a lot to me. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one. Let's get into it. So when we're talking about problems with James Paxton, it's hard to ignore just how good James Paxton has been for the Boston Red Sox this year. Like I mentioned in the intro, James Paxton has essentially been your best starter on the 2023 staff, specifically in the rotation. In fact, so far this year, over 17 total starts, James Paxton has an ERA of 3.79 with a 4.21 FIP and a 1.21 ERA plus. So far this year, he has been about 21% more productive than the average pitcher in baseball on the mound, specifically as a starting pitcher. Now, the other great thing about James Paxton so far this year has been his availability. We talked about it in the intro, but you had a situation partially through this year where you had Sale, Whitlock, and Houck all on the IL, and you were really trying to stay afloat with two legitimate starting pitchers, and you were trying to get Cutter Crawford into that starting position spot, right? You were sort of stretching him out, trying to make him available, and Paxton was consistent all the way through that. Paxton has done a great job of getting you through games. He's averaging about 5 1/3 innings pitched so far this year, which may not sound like a crazy deep outing, but 5 1/3 inning every single time out there on average has your starting pitcher going into the 6th inning every single time he's out, which is very helpful in a time 2 out of 5 of your starting pitchers are coming out of the bullpen, right? James Paxton was able to go out there every 5th or 6th day and give you enough production to keep your bullpen alive and keep it going over that stretch. So there were a ton of benefits to having James Paxton in the 2023 Red Sox rotation, which may lead a couple of you guys to be sitting there thinking to yourselves, Corbin, why are we making a video on James Paxton if he's been so consistent and productive this entire year? And to answer that question, we do have to dive a little bit deeper. In fact, we have to split James Paxton's season up into 2 separate categories, right? We're essentially going to split his starts right down the middle, because once you do that, it's sort of a tale of 2 cities. His first 9 starts of the year were absolutely fantastic. In those 9 starts, James Paxton had just a 2.70 ERA with a 3.23 FIP in 50 innings pitched, with 61 strikeouts and 16 walks. In fact, in those first 9 starts, he gave up more walks than he did runs at 15. Just overall, really impressive performance from James Paxton. For the first 2 months of the year, between May and June, James Paxton made those 9 starts and he was absolutely dominant. The problem we're talking about today doesn't come in those first 9 starts. It comes in the 8 starts after, because overall he's still been fairly solid, but they're much different statistics than he had at the beginning of the year. In fact, in his last half of his start so far this season, James Paxton has a much higher 5.13 ERA with a 5.43 FIP in just 40 innings pitched. He had about half the strikeouts as he did in his first 9 starts, with only 10 less innings at 36, and he has almost the same amount of walks at 13, meaning he's walking more batters per 9 than he was at the beginning of the year. His opponent OPS went up to 872 over his last 8 starts, which compared to his opponent OPS of just 587 over his first 9 starts is a massive increase. Essentially, over his last 8 starts, James Paxton's giving up more runs, he's striking out less batters, he's walking more batters, and he's allowing more hard contact. And to be honest with you, that's a pretty steep increase, right? He essentially almost doubled his ERA. He's walking a lot more guys. He's given up a lot more hard contact. The question here is, what is going on with James Paxton? We're talking about indicators of James Paxton degressing as he goes through the 2023 seasons. One of the key things to look at here is his fastball velocity. Taking a look at this graph right here, it kind of jumps all over the place. It's focusing on his fastball velocity in every single start he has. Now, it jumps up and down a bit, but overall, when we're looking at averages throughout the year, it is slowly sloped downwards, meaning it's had regression throughout the 2023 season. In fact, at the beginning of the year, James Paxton was throwing around 96 miles an hour, a little bit above, a little bit less, but pretty much consistently sitting around that 96 mile an hour mark. Now, where we are today, his latest start, he was averaging around 94, 95 miles an hour, which may not sound like that big of a decrease, but when you're talking about professional major league hitters, the difference between 95 and 96 miles an hour, laying off that breaking ball, laying off that changeup, that could have a huge difference in the way you play the game. Now, there's another thing I wanted to point out to everyone on this graph. The big thing for me is not only just the averages of his pitch in a single start, because you could see that dot in the middle is around what he's averaging, right? The other thing I want to look at are his high-low values. What was his highest mile per hour in a certain range, and what was his lowest mile an hour in a certain range? At the beginning of the year, you were seeing most of his pitches staying in between 94 and 97 miles an hour. Towards the later half of this season, you're starting to see that number vary much more drastically, right? Even in a start 2 starts ago, he had a fastball that was just 90 miles an hour. Now, there could be circumstances to that fastball, different things, but overall, you could tell that by the end of the year, James Paxton's velo has started to drop pretty significantly between every single start, which to me indicates that there is some fatigue going on with James Paxton, which I think is pretty expected, right? This is the first time James Paxton's hit the 17 start mark since 2019. Essentially, it's been 4 years since James Paxton has hit 17 games in a single season, and obviously that workload is going to catch up to someone who has not done it in a minimum of 3 years, pretty much 4 years, and it's going to make him throw a little bit slower than at the beginning of the year. That's pretty natural for almost every single starting pitcher in Major League Baseball, and on top of that too, he is in his 30s, so it feels more natural that that velo is dropping. But at the same time too, is there a way for the Red Sox to minimize that fatigue? And the answer to that is yeah, there's a pretty simple answer in trying to figure out how to minimize James Paxton's fatigue, and that answer is just simply give him more rest, right? And it feels like a really simple answer, and it might actually be a pretty simple solution, because with Tanner Houck coming back yesterday, that increases your starting pitching possibilities from 5 starting pitchers to 6 starting pitchers. And here, let me show you what I mean, right? You got Houck coming back, you have Sale in the rotation, Paxton, Bayo, Cutter, and then you've got Nick Pivetta as well, who hasn't really been starting games, but you use an opener for 1 inning, and then Nick Pivetta's pretty much essentially been able to give you a solid 6-5 innings after that, which gives you 6 possible options in this rotation. Now, if the Red Sox really want to minimize James Paxton's fatigue over the last couple weeks of the season, the best way to do that is to stretch him out a bit, is to allow him an extra day every single start so he can get that rest that he needs and continue to pitch the way we know James Paxton can pitch in the first half of the season. Now, I'm not just saying rest him because he's getting older, because he hasn't pitched in a while, but there is some actual factual evidence that could point to him getting more rest and being more successful on the mound. Now, this is a bit of a smaller sample size, but so far this year, James Paxton has made 3 starts with the average 4 days of rest. In those 3 starts, James Paxton has a really high 9.82 ERA. Now, in the games where he has 5 days of rest, which so far this year has been 6 starts, James Paxton drops that ERA significantly down to just 1.95. Then in games where he has had 6 or more days of rest, he has a 3.83 ERA. Now, clearly there is a bit of a pattern here, right? When James Paxton gets more rest than normally, he pitches a whole lot better than when he gets the average 4 days of rest, which again, definitely points to the fact that, hey, he's fatiguing a little bit as he gets older, as he starts games for the first time in multiple years, right? It makes sense, and this could be the easiest solution. Now, it's a lot more easier said than done, right? Having 6 men in the rotation puts a lot of strain on your bullpen, especially if you're going to use Nick Pivetta and an opener every 5-6 days. It's going to eliminate 2 people from your bullpen usage the day before and the day after. And on top of that too, just having 2 players in your bullpen who are essentially only going as an opener and a starter really limits your options for the other 5 days where you're not using them. So over time, yeah, this could hurt a little bit, but I also don't think you need to rest James Paxton 6+ days every single time in between rotational turns. And it feels like that's what the Red Sox are planning on doing going forward for the rest of the year. Alex Cora, when mentioned about Tanner Houck getting healthy, said they would still probably use an opener here and there. So if the Red Sox for the rest of the year use an opener, say every other turn through the rotation, you should be able to get James Paxton the rest he needs and still have fairly solid outings throughout the rest of the 2023 season. In my opinion, it is vital for the Red Sox to ensure that James Paxton manages his fatigue in the best way possible, right? If you can't give him that extra day, you need to figure out the best way to minimize the effects of the fatigue, or you're going to see a lot more games like you saw a couple nights ago in Houston, right? He got absolutely torched. His fastball looked flat. He couldn't find the zone. He had no idea where his pitches were going. And yes, defense didn't help with that, but there is a way to minimize James Paxton's fatigue, and this to me feels like the best solution, because at the end of the day, James Paxton is absolutely vital to what the Red Sox are trying to do. He's been vital this entire year, and there's a reason you didn't trade him at the deadline. It's time to protect that reason and allow him to get back to the pitcher that we saw at the beginning of the year. But all of this is just my opinion. So let me know in the comment section down below. 1, what do you think is going on with James Paxton? 2, do you agree with me? With the statistics and the facts that I laid out in front of you, does this argument make sense? And 3, how would you fix this problem? Let me know all your thoughts on what James Paxton has been doing over the last couple of weeks in the comment section down below. As always, if you made it to the end of this video, do me a favor. Make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're new here, we talk Red Sox content almost every single day. Also, make sure you guys have hit the like button on this video as well. Helps these videos out a ton, and it would mean a lot to me. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you in the red seats.